the sexuality a very, very tricky territory to explore. Why?
Well, because I think it can become exploitative very quickly, and it can become reductive. I think our erotic life is a huge part of our makeup. So if you're going to explore it, it has to be done as sensitively as any dramatic scene. So that takes a lot of bravery and also a trust on the part of the performers, and certainly a sensitivity on the part of the director. And it's, I think we're all surrounded by pornography and exploitative images, and that has nothing to do with eroticism, and which is really has to be detailed in the psychology of the characters. So you need time and commitment and intelligence, and you have to treat it like any dramatic scene.
Your film is based on a film previous, I think it's called Natalie, a
Yes.
French film. Why? Have you seen the film and you said, I have to... Did
No,
the script came to you?
Yeah, the script came to me. I mean, I had seen Natalie, which I liked, but I never thought of making a remake. But then the producer had optioned the right, and this is actually a reinvention. It's not very similar. The setup is the same, but then it becomes very, very different from Natalie. But I think in some ways it feels like a parable. It's funny because I was talking with a critic here who said that there's an early story by Cervantes, which is the same premise of a man who thinks the wife is having an affair and tells his best friend to flirt with her and report back to him, and he starts hearing these stories, and he realizes that he's forced his wife to become unfaithful through his friend. I've never read this story, but it seems to me that there's something universal about this setup. So, it's a reinvention of a French film. I don't think the characters are similar.
Has your work as a director changed in any way from the movies you wrote yourself?
Well, I think it's profoundly different because it's not the same structure. I mean, I think that in terms
I'm sorry. Your approach as a director to the material.
No.
You didn't write this.
No, it's interesting. When the producer approached me, he loved Exotica, and he said, that he wanted to have the feeling of Exotica, but even though the structure is completely different. But I think there's an approach I have to performance and to actors. I'm very interested in the spaces between people and the mystery of how people communicate, and so that there's a tone and even maybe a visual sense of color and light, which is very much in my vision. So I can take a script like this, which is not my story, and which is more linear, but it still has some of the tonal elements of my own work, and I feel close to it.
Your producer said that this is maybe isn't my word. This is in fact your first Hollywood film, said your producer. Are you agree with?
Well, it's an interesting term because he's a Hollywood producer, but it's not a Hollywood financing. It's Studio Canal.
Sure.
So in fact, it's a European studio. So I don't know if it's Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood means that it's being made by Universal or Warner Brothers or some, but it's not. It's actually it's a European studio. So
But would you agree to the assessment that your work over this decade has become more traditional, comparing to the work you've done before?
I don't know. If I look at the first half of Adoration, I think it's more radical in some ways than anything I've done. Then it settles into a more traditional form, maybe. But
also Where Truth Lies.
and Where the Truth Lies, though, is actually it's a play on genre, right? I mean, and maybe that one. Actually, I would say Where the Truth Lies is more a Hollywood film than this one, because it's actually dealing with Hollywood, and it's dealing with that whole American culture and the mythology of Hollywood. So I'm not. I think Hollywood is sort of absorbed with a view of itself that it's imposing in a global way, and I've never really been part of that system. But maybe Where the Truth Lies is examining this phenomenon of American pop culture and maybe it's more Hollywood than this movie is. This movie is using Hollywood stars, but putting them in a very unusual setting.
And what's the advantage of being based in Toronto or Canada and not being part of Tinseltown? And also, Ivan Reitman is kind of bi-coastal, I would say.
Yeah. Well, the advantage. I mean, the great advantage.
If there's any.
Yeah, the great advantage in this movie was be able to use Toronto as a new character. I mean, the greatest thing was when we were doing the test screenings in Los Angeles, and the people were going, "Wow, it's so great to be in a different place, a city I have not seen before." And that's one of the real excitements of this movie was using Toronto as almost virgin territory. I mean, it's the first time that a foreign financed film is using Toronto as Toronto. And
not as a standing for
yeah,
New
not
York.
as a standing.
Yeah, sure.
And when I got the script, it was set in San Francisco, and so at first I was very excited because I love some of my favorite films are set in San Francisco, but it was great to convince the producers to move it to Toronto. And you're right that Ivan had his childhood in Toronto, so he had an old reading about it, but when he came and I showed him all these new locations and these new buildings, he got very excited about this idea as well. So it was a great combination of different spirits, because you're right. I mean, he is the quintessential Hollywood producer. I mean, obviously he made Ghostbusters and Animal House, and now he's producing like Disturbia and these other movies. So he knows that world, but he's also, was able to appreciate the character of Toronto as a character in the film.
The closeness to youth that from Hollywood, has it to do that I think it's the first film that your wife has in a culture no is participating.
Well,
is it correct? That's
well, she had a small part in Where the Truth Lies, like a cameo, but
this is the first where
one.
she doesn't participate.
Yeah, in a major role. Yeah, and it was, and I think she's been such a huge part of my films as well. I mean, like she's such a great actress, and she has a very particular sensibility, and so maybe like one senses her absence in the film, but. I've done other work without her as well, and she certainly has been in many films that I have not directed. So, and we will continue to work in the future as well. But this was not the right project.